So I was born Mary, and Louise was my mother's best friend, Louise Buckman, so I was named after her. And, but I was always called Meryl. My father's made that name up, and he liked that name, and so I hated it.
Hollywood is a place that crowns geniuses, and just as often forces them to pay with their very hearts. Meryl Streep, the woman the world calls the saint of cinema, has walked through more than half a century of acting without taking a single year off. She holds 3 Academy Awards, dozens of iconic roles, and a level of influence few can match. But behind that brilliance lies a life interwoven with scars. Her greatest love vanished in an instant as she held her man in her arms for his final breath. A marriage of over 40 years ended in silence. She has stood in the eye of Hollywood's most shocking scandals, questioned, doubted, and forced to speak when a single wrong word could erase her career. And every role that seemed glorious was another time she tore herself apart to live inside someone else's pain. How can a woman remain at the pinnacle of fame while passing through the deepest valleys of tragedy and still keep moving forward? The answer lies in the story of Meryl Streep, the journey of an artist who turned both pain and talent into a light that nothing could ever extinguish. Early life. Meryl Streep was born in 1949 in the town of Summit, New Jersey, into a quintessential American middle-class family. Her mother was an amateur artist, her father a pharmaceutical executive. Everything about her childhood was steady and sufficient, but it was precisely that just enough that left her growing up with a sense of calm, tinged with blandness. Not remarkable, not extraordinary. Her childhood was marked by the quiet space of an opera rehearsal room. At 12, she began formal vocal training because she felt she needed to excel at something to escape that muted feeling. In high school, she tried acting for the first time in a school play. To her surprise, she felt no nerves. On the contrary, the stage made it easier to breathe than the real world. That feeling was passion, though more than that, it was a perfect fit, a sense that her soul had found an anchor. After graduating, Streep applied to Vassar College with the initial intent of studying costume design. But when theater professor Clinton Atkinson encouraged her to audition for Miss Julie, a demanding play, she agreed. That performance changed her trajectory. A representative from the Yale School of Drama was in the audience that night, invited her to apply, and she was accepted. At Yale, she was not a standout student. On the contrary, many classmates and instructors felt she was too reserved, too cerebral, lacking theatrical flair. Meryl knew it and simply stayed quiet, observing, learning, and doing more than her share of the work. No one imagined that the soft-spoken girl who kept her head down would go so far. Perhaps even she didn't. But when the Broadway stage finally opened to her, she stepped onto it with every ounce of quiet preparation she had made. It was a beginning marked by slow, steady steps, and the kind of patience that earns lasting respect. Early career and breakthrough. In 1975, Meryl Streep first stepped onto the Broadway stage in Trelawney of the Wells. The role was not a sensation, but it was enough for those with a trained eye to notice. There was something distinctly different about the blonde newcomer, a kind of emotional precision that was unshowy, yet absolutely exact. 2 years later, she landed a small part in Julia, 1977. But it was The Deer Hunter, 1978, that truly changed everything. In a film dominated by intense, silent male characters, Streep appeared quiet and gentle, and it was that very gentleness that became an anchor for audiences as they watched the war's brutality corrode the souls of young Americans. Her screen time was brief, but hauntingly memorable. The film was made under extraordinary personal circumstances. Her partner, John Cazale, was dying of cancer, and she had pleaded with the director not to fire him so he could work until the end of his life. That same year, she appeared in the television miniseries Holocaust. For the first time, Meryl entered the homes of millions of Americans, not through an elite stage, but on their living room screens. The role earned her her first Emmy Award, and just a year later, she stood on the Oscar stage for Kramer vs. Kramer, 1979, playing a mother who abandons her child, only to return to fight for custody. It was not the lead role, but it was enough to make her an icon. The film brought her her first Academy Award, yet it was also one of the most emotionally painful experiences of her career. Co-star Dustin Hoffman slapped her for real on camera, and certain scenes were manipulated by the director, who provoked her emotions by invoking John Cazale, who had died not long before. 3 years later, she took on Sophie's Choice, 1982, portraying a Polish woman who had survived the concentration camps. The role was so harrowing that many advised her to turn it down to protect her mental health. But Streep did not look for excuses. She looked for ways. She taught herself German and Polish, lived in isolation for a month, and immersed herself entirely in the character of a mother who had endured Auschwitz. The performance earned her her first Best Actress Oscar. From then on, difficult roles seemed to find her as if by silent design. A mysterious Victorian woman in The French Lieutenant's Woman, 1981. A factory worker turned activist in Silkwood, 1983. An aristocratic Danish author in Out of Africa, 1985. And an Australian mother, Lindy Chamberlain, convicted of murdering her baby after it disappeared in the desert night, A Cry in the Dark, 1988. None of these roles were easy, but not one could defeat her professionalism or her extraordinary craft. By the late 1980s, an ironic twist began to unfold. Meryl Streep's very mastery of acting placed her inside a narrow box. She was seen as the emblem of serious films, weighty roles, and educated sorrow. Some harsher critics claimed she was all technique, so precise that she lacked genuine emotion. Streep disliked public squabbles, so she set out to dismantle the label others had assigned her. In the early 1990s, audiences were startled to see her in comedy such as Postcards from the Edge, 1990, playing an addicted actress struggling to escape the shadow of her famous mother, and Death Becomes Her, 1992, where she embodied a Hollywood socialite obsessed with eternal youth, satirizing the very industry that had once celebrated her. Then came the action thriller The River Wild, 1994, where Meryl navigated raging rapids, both on screen and in real life, as if to prove she could do anything. Not every project was a hit, but each role was a way of reclaiming control over her image, and enough to inspire both admiration and envy. Then came The Bridges of Madison County, 1995. No one dared mock her as overly technical or buried under complex makeup. She became an Iowa housewife, torn between the safety of her routine and the pull of passion. Streep played Francesca with the hesitation, fear, and longing so many middle-aged women keep hidden, and audiences wept. For the first time in years, Meryl Streep returned in full emotional force, touching the hearts of even the most skeptical viewers. From there, the roles flowed as if by fate. Marvin's Room, 1996. One True Thing, 1998. The Hours, 2002. Until Adaptation, 2002, where she played an eccentric author, awkward, sensual, and reckless, and earned her 13th Oscar nomination, surpassing Katharine Hepburn. But the true turning point came at 57 when she became Miranda Priestley, the icy editor-in-chief in The Devil Wears Prada, 2006. A character seemingly villainous, yet one Meryl infused with the unspoken vulnerability of a woman so powerful there was no room left for weakness. The whole world hated Miranda, yet feared they might be just like her. And when people thought Meryl had peaked, she sang and danced in Mamma Mia, 2008, then transformed into a stern nun in doubt only months later, two utterly opposite characters, each leaving audiences in silent awe. She closed the decade as Julia Child in Julie and Julia, 2009, playful, eccentric, brimming with life. Another Oscar nomination, another proof that women past 60 need not retreat. They can explode onto the screen in ways no one sees coming. By then it became clear. Meryl Streep didn't change to be loved more. She changed to keep living the work, to keep giving to the audiences who had always loved her. At an age when most would step back, Meryl entered a new chapter, where each role wasn't just a challenge, but proof that no mold could ever contain her. After Julia Child, she unexpectedly appeared as an animated fox. In Fantastic Mr. Fox, 2009, Meryl voiced Mrs. Fox, not just a side character, but the gentle, intelligent soul of the entire story. With her signature voice, she gave an animated figure the depth of a real human being, something not every actor can achieve. That same year, she joined Alec Baldwin and Steve Martin in It's Complicated, a romantic comedy in which she played a divorced woman, having an affair with her ex-husband. Lighthearted, witty, and charming, Streep showed the world that women in their 60s can still love, make mistakes, and remain captivating in their own way. Then came 2011, The Iron Lady. Portraying Margaret Thatcher was not merely a technical feat. From mastering the Grantham accent to shifting from the steely politician to the frail woman facing dementia, Streep didn't just resemble Thatcher, she made viewers forget they were watching a film. The role brought her a third Oscar, but more importantly, no one disputed the win. She won because no one else could have done what she did. In 2012, she switched gears again with Hope Springs, a gentle comedy about an older couple, opposite Tommy Lee Jones, seeking marriage counseling. No political costumes or grand stages, just Meryl sitting beside her husband in a therapy session, breaking hearts with a glance, a sigh. The following year, she shook audiences with August, Osage County, 2013, playing Violet, a domineering, bitter mother at the center of a deeply broken family. Her husband has just committed suicide, her children have returned to confront her, and she, worn down by cancer and pill addiction, still commands every gaze. Brutal and unflinching, the role earned Meryl her 18th Oscar nomination, an achievement no other actor in history had reached. From an animated fox to a clumsy wife, a fierce prime minister, and a mother so cruel she bordered on monstrous, Meryl didn't just play her characters, she dismantled herself so each one could step in and live without ever being overshadowed by her. And the older she grew, the more she acted as if every role might be her last. Not for applause, but to speak for those who had never been heard. By the mid-2000s and 10s, people began calling Meryl Streep a last survivor, a woman who could keep going when most of her peers had faded into obscurity. But for her, survival was not enough. She needed to be challenged and to reinvent herself. In 2014, Streep became the icy leader in The Giver, set in a future society where emotions are controlled and memories erased. In The Homesman, she appeared only briefly as the wife of a minister caring for women mentally scarred by the harsh Western frontier, yet it was enough to remind audiences that compassion can bloom in the most barren places. Then came Into the Woods, where she played a brooding, sharp, and yearning witch, a role that earned her her 19th Oscar nomination. Streep was unafraid to appear awkward. In Ricky and The Flash, 2015, she embodied a failed rock singer, messy hair, worn leather jacket, guitar in hand, adrift in her family and in her own past. It was a Meryl Streep without pride, without polish. Just a mother who had made mistakes, trying to make amends through a song. Soon after, she returned to history, playing women's rights activist Emmeline Pankhurst in Suffragette, 2015, then dazzling in Florence Foster Jenkins, 2016, as a Victorian-era woman with syphilis who couldn't sing, yet still booked Carnegie Hall. Critics called it the most tragicomic performance of Meryl Streep's career, and her 20th Oscar nomination was all but inevitable. When she took the role of Katharine Graham in The Post, 2017, she was 68. Yet the sharpness, skepticism, and courage of the Washington Post publisher, who dared to release the Pentagon Papers in a turbulent political climate, evoked the Meryl of Sophie's Choice. Not softer, not gentler, but sharper, more necessary than ever. Her 21st Oscar nomination was the final confirmation. This was a career that could not be replicated. Entering her 70s, she still didn't slow down. Mamma Mia! Here we go again! 2018, Mary Poppins Returns, then the role of the wealthy matriarch in Big Little Lies, 2019. Whether in musicals, fantasy, or television drama, Meryl became a vital structural piece. Small, but indispensable. Quiet, but resonant. In The Laundromat, 2019, she exposed a global money laundering system, then transformed into the stern Aunt March in Little Women, once again playing the audience's own memories. People saw Meryl and saw a piece of their childhood in her. From 2020 onward, even as COVID-19 brought Hollywood to a standstill, she kept appearing. The Prom, Let Them All Talk, Don't Look Up, where she played a self-satisfied U.S. president so indifferent to the apocalypse, it was chilling. Served as a societal warning, but also a quiet reminder. Hollywood is losing its deeper voices, and she remains one of the few left. In 2023, at 74, Meryl Streep returned to television. In Extrapolations, she questioned the future of our planet. In Only Murders in the Building, she laughed, sang, and even poked fun at herself. No need to be serious, no need to be monumental, only the need to keep telling the stories that matter, in a voice the world still wants to hear. Nearly 50 years since her debut, Meryl Streep has never taken a year off. Because she doesn't see herself as a legend, she sees herself as someone with work still to do. Personal life and tragedy. Amid the glare of heavyweight roles and a cascade of Oscar nominations, Meryl Streep loved in the simplest way. She fell for a man 14 years her senior, not conventionally handsome by Hollywood standards, not a headline grabber off screen, but someone who could make her fall silent and listen. That man was John Cazale, the star of The Godfather, Dog Day Afternoon, and one of the actors Al Pacino once called the greatest unsung teacher of my life. They met in 1976 during a Shakespeare play in New York. John was already a stage legend, while Meryl was just a young actress fresh out of Yale. Yet they found each other under stage lights and in long rehearsal hours. They lived together in a worn Tribeca apartment. No contracts, no public declarations. Just two people, two artistic souls, and a quiet love. But fate was merciless. While filming The Deer Hunter in 1977, John Cazale was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. The production considered replacing him, but Meryl pleaded with the director to keep him in the role and requested that all his scenes be shot first. "Because I didn't know if he'd make it," she later said. Throughout his treatment, Meryl took any role she could, including the TV miniseries Holocaust, just to cover his medical bills. She stayed by his bedside, holding his hand every night. When John died in March 1978, she collapsed onto his chest, desperately begging, "Please, come back." It's said that in his final moments, John opened his eyes, looked at her, smiled, and whispered, "You'll be okay." Then he was gone, taking a piece of Meryl Streep's heart with him. After the devastating loss of John Cazale, many believed Meryl Streep would not be able to love again, at least not for a long time. But then Don Gummer appeared, not as a replacement, but as someone quietly extending his hand when she could no longer stand on her own. Born in 1946, Don was a talented sculptor and also a Yale graduate, the same university where Meryl had studied drama. When he learned she was about to be evicted from her apartment after John's death, Don simply offered, "My place will be empty for a few months, if you need it." It wasn't a romantic gesture, just kindness at the right moment. But then, they began exchanging letters, across work trips, long filming days, and lonely nights. 6 months later, they held a simple wedding in the garden of Meryl's parents' home. Her mother worried, thinking her daughter was rushing to fill an emotional void. But Meryl said only one thing: "I haven't forgotten John, but I know I have to go on. And Don has taught me how to do that." From then on, they walked side by side without fanfare, raising 4 children: Henry, Mamie, Grace, and Louise. Though most followed artistic careers, Meryl always kept the family away from the media. "They're my oasis," she once said. "I'm happy to be a mother, to be my children's friend. And Don, he's always let me be an artist, but he's never made me feel guilty for being away." After the children grew up, they moved to New York, settling in a quiet apartment where no one mentioned Oscars or upcoming roles. Don continued to accompany Meryl to most award ceremonies, always in the audience, never once trying to step onto the stage. When Meryl won her 3rd Oscar in 2012, she didn't begin by thanking the director or her colleagues. Instead, she opened with, "First, I want to thank Don, because if I leave it to the end, they'll play me off. And I want him to hear this: everything I value most in my life has come from him." They weathered over 4 decades together, likely not without rough patches. Meryl never hid that. She once said, "If you want to keep a marriage, learn to talk about even the little things, and accept that you're not always right." And Don? When asked about living with one of the greatest actors of all time, he just shrugged. We still argue about whether to wash the dishes by hand or put them in the dishwasher. It was a love without noise, not scripted by the silver screen, but written in handwritten letters, late dinners, and hugs after long shoots. And perhaps that's exactly why it endured longer than any role Meryl Streep ever played. And you? Have you ever loved someone enough to start over, even when your heart was still healing? And if you had to choose one film that best reflects Meryl's subtlety and depth, which would it be? Share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes your story might be the anchor someone else needs. Yet after more than 4 decades of seemingly unshakable marriage, Meryl and Don quietly entered a different chapter, one where love no longer meant constant closeness. In October 2023, Meryl's representative confirmed that the two had been separated for more than 6 years, still maintaining a relationship built on respect and quiet understanding. There were no loud announcements, no accusations, no scandals. They stepped out of each other's lives in the same way they had once built them, silently and calmly. The last time Don appeared publicly with Meryl was at the 2018 Oscars. Since then, he has not been seen, but neither has she denied his absence. She still wears her wedding ring. She still honors the years they shared. Perhaps, as she once said, "You're not always right. And after all, the thing to do is to let go without hurting the other person." For Meryl, no goodbye is ever easy. But there are partings that need no tears or divorce papers. Just the mutual understanding that love, like art, is sometimes a silence longer than the final round of applause. Throughout a career defined by intellect, integrity, and the image of an exemplary artist, Meryl Streep was not immune to the storm surrounding one of the biggest scandals in Hollywood history, the Harvey Weinstein case. And as with every role she had ever taken on, her way of handling this scandal was complex, uncompromising, yet not entirely free from public controversy. In 2017, when a wave of sexual assault allegations against Weinstein came to light, Meryl quickly issued a statement, calling his actions disgraceful and inexcusable, while praising the women who came forward as the real heroes. Alongside Judi Dench, she was among the first major stars to publicly condemn the powerful producer who had, in part, helped her to an Oscar win with The Iron Lady. Yet her swift condemnation did not stop the torrent of public criticism, especially from Rose McGowan, one of the leading voices against Weinstein. McGowan accused Streep of staying silent too long and happily working with a monster, dismissing her statement as too late and too calculated. Streep's response was not only to deny any knowledge of Weinstein's abuse, but to push back. "Don't talk about my silence. Talk about Melania Trump's silence, and Ivanka's too. They need to speak up." That statement, directed at the First Lady and the President's daughter during the height of the Me Too movement, quickly ignited a heated media battle, particularly with Donald Trump Jr., who labeled Streep a fraud, insisted everyone in Hollywood knew about Weinstein, and accused her of hypocrisy. The controversy deepened when a 2012 Golden Globe speech in which Streep had jokingly referred to Weinstein as God was unearthed. Worse still, Weinstein's legal team cited another of her remarks, that he had always been respectful in their professional relationship, as evidence in his defense. Streep swiftly condemned this as a patently absurd and self-serving misuse of her words, declaring, "Harvey Weinstein's abuse of those women is his responsibility, and if there is any justice left in this system, he will be punished, no matter how many good films he's made." Still, public opinion remained divided. Some believed she truly hadn't known, pointing to Weinstein's skill at concealing his misconduct. Others, however, questioned, how could an intelligent, sharp, and outspoken advocate for women like Meryl Streep not have sensed something? In the post-Me Too world, truth is not just about what you know. It's also about what you cannot prove you didn't know. The outrage peaked when an anonymous street artist plastered posters around Los Angeles showing Streep alongside Weinstein, her eyes covered by a red bar with the words, "She knew." For Meryl, it was one of those rare moments when she found herself on the defensive in the midst of a collective moral firestorm, where the line between not knowing and not wanting to know seemed almost erased. In a statement to the Huffington Post, she said, "I wasn't deliberately silent. I didn't collude. I don't like young women being assaulted. I didn't know." She argued that Weinstein had deliberately kept people in the dark, precisely because the presence of stars like her gave him a veneer of credibility that helped mask his actions. Streep revealed that she had tried to reach out privately to McGowan to express respect and empathy, but received no reply. "I am truly sorry she sees me as an adversary," she said, "because both of us, and all women in this industry, are standing up against the same enemy. A status quo that wants to drag Hollywood back into the dark ages where women are exploited, mistreated, and shut out of positions of power." Although no evidence has ever suggested Streep's complicity, the episode left a stain that could not be entirely erased, not because she was guilty, but because she had stood too close to a dark force in a system where silence was the default condition for survival. And if anything lingers after it all, it is not an accusation, but a question without a clear answer. Is conscience strong enough to speak out when your career depends on the very person you must expose? But not every controversy surrounding Meryl Streep was rooted in politics or the ethics of the entertainment industry. Sometimes, a single dress was enough to send shockwaves through the fashion world, especially when the names Chanel and Karl Lagerfeld were involved. Before the 2017 Oscars, Karl Lagerfeld, the legendary creative director of Chanel, publicly accused Streep of ordering and then canceling a couture gown simply because she found another fashion house willing to pay her to wear theirs. According to Lagerfeld, Streep's team had requested alterations to the gown, only to suddenly cancel everything because someone paid her. He quipped, "A brilliant actress, but also cheap, no?" In response, Streep's camp flatly denied the claim. She had never accepted payment to wear an outfit on the red carpet, and such behavior was against my personal ethics. Chanel later admitted there may have been a misunderstanding, but reputational damage is far harder to mend than a fashion sketch. Public opinion split. Some questioned the credibility of Lagerfeld's accusation. He was known for his bluntness and impulsive remarks. Others wondered if even Meryl Streep, an ethical icon in the public eye, could be immune to the quiet exchanges that take place behind the scenes. In an era where a movie star's image extends beyond performance to brand value, this incident underscored how thin the line can be between art and commerce, between ideals and reality. And even without ever admitting to any wrongdoing, Streep could not stop herself from becoming a symbol under scrutiny, perhaps even suspicion, in an age of collective disillusionment. Legacy and influence. Perhaps the reason Meryl Streep has never been drowned out by storms of controversy is the legacy she has quietly built over more than half a century. In a world where fame can be shaped by a few tweets, she has chosen instead to be remembered through transformation, complete, profound, and never the same twice. At 76, Streep has played more than 70 roles. Yet the strange thing is, audiences don't see Meryl in them. They see themselves. A worn-out single mother, a conflicted prime minister, an awkward opera diva, or a chef lost in the labyrinth of French cuisine. None of them perfect, but all of them real. She doesn't play a role. She lives it. 3 Oscars, 21 nominations, numbers that would make any actor bow their head. But what earned Streep the title Saint of Cinema is not the record itself. It's empathy. When awarding her the Presidential Medal of Freedom, Barack Obama said, "Meryl Streep has turned empathy into a power, not just to tell stories, but to change culture." From Julia Child, Margaret Thatcher, and Lindy Chamberlain to Florence Foster Jenkins, the characters she chooses are never cute, never neatly packaged, never written simply to please the audience. But Meryl understands them. She peels back every hard shell, every inner conflict, every quiet wound, and makes people realize that inside every odd or difficult character lies a familiar loneliness we have all carried. Current life. And then, as with every great figure in the arts, there came a time for Meryl Streep to slow down. Not because she had run out of roles to play, but because she chose to step away from the noise, to live a simpler life like the women she had so often portrayed. Strong, quiet, and profoundly deep. No social media, no talk shows, no chasing the spotlight for self-promotion. She lives in her own world, a place without sales pitches, only choices strong enough to make people listen. At 76, Streep continues to work, but only on projects she truly believes in. Most recently, she appeared in the series Extrapolations, and notably in seasons 3 and 5 of the hit series Only Murders in the Building. As Loretta Durkin, the love interest of Martin Short's character, Meryl surprised audiences not only with her comedic return, but also with passionate scenes that fueled rumors of an off-screen romance. She has confirmed she will return for season 5, 2025, but declined all behind-the-scenes interviews, as if determined to keep that character and her own emotions beyond the reach of media dissection. This year, she also sent Hollywood a buzz by confirming her return in The Devil Wears Prada 2, alongside Anne Hathaway, Emily Blunt, and Stanley Tucci. The sequel, slated for release in 2026, will see Miranda Priestley back, now a fashion queen in the twilight of her power. Filming isn't even complete, yet the news of Meryl reprising this iconic role has already dominated headlines worldwide. No one knows whether she still feels the same fire for acting. But in 2025, she unexpectedly won another Emmy, her first in the children's category, for The 3 Questions from Storyline Online. Accepting the award, Meryl simply said, "Children need to be heard, even before they know how to tell their stories." Away from the stage, she keeps a low profile with her family and grandchildren. Her daughters, Mamie and Grace, are both actresses, while her eldest son, Henry, is a musician. Recently, the public has caught glimpses of a third generation emerging. Meryl's granddaughter has begun exploring acting, continuing a rare artistic legacy in American culture. Though she rarely walks the red carpet, she still appears at select major cultural events. From the King's Foundation Awards in the UK, to Broadway production Good Night and Good Luck, to the SNL 50th Anniversary Show, where her brief sketch drew a full standing ovation. She remains the same, graceful, reserved, and never one to complain. "I don't want to be a monument," she once said. "I want to be a working actor." And perhaps that is exactly why people can't take their eyes off her, even when she is no longer standing center stage. Meryl Streep has never lived simply to be called a legend. She has lived to keep telling the stories the world needs to hear, even when her own heart is still bleeding. She has walked across the highest peaks and through the deepest valleys, leaving behind not just records or golden statues, but the imprint of an artist who dared to give herself completely to every role. When the screen goes dark and the theater lights fade, what remains is the feeling that you have just touched a life so real, it aches. And perhaps that is why, at any moment in time, the name Meryl Streep still makes people stop, to listen, to remember, and to believe that cinema still holds souls like hers. And what about you? Has there ever been a Meryl Streep performance that left you speechless? Or made you see yourself somewhere in the story? Share that moment in the comments. Because who knows? Your story might touch someone else, just as Meryl has touched the hearts of millions around the world. And if you want to keep joining journeys as moving as this one, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any story waiting to be told next.